Hey everybody, welcome to Outpost Unknown and our review of Godzilla minus one. I always say minus zero for some reason.
I want to say -0 too.
Yes, but it's
You're both wrong. Yeah, it's not
yes.
zero.
Ronan pointed that out to me on a show we were doing. He's like, it's minus one, it's not minus zero. So yeah, we all went and saw the movie in the theater, and spoiler alert, please go see this in the theater. I mean, we're going to give a
Mhm.
glowing review of this, most likely, all of us here. So while it's in the theater, this is a movie that you should support. We always talk about, well, are there movies that are really worth it? This is one of those movies, at least in my opinion, that people should go out and check it out in the theaters before it's gone, because I'm sure it won't be around for a long time.
No, it's
Um,
it's a limited run. It's done well enough that they extended its runtime here. But having said that, by the time this episode airs, for all I know, it's already gone.
I'll have it up
Yeah.
tonight. So we're recording this on December 16th. It's a Saturday night. So hopefully, you wake up
So get
you
moving.
wake up early Sunday morning, you're like, you know what, I'm skipping church. What should I do today? You tune over to Outpost Unknown. You see, oh, they got a new review of Godzilla minus one. You hear our glowing review, and you're like, I'm going to spend my time going to go check out the new Godzilla movie this weekend. So, my name is Matthew. Joining me once again in the Outpost is Jeff.
What's up? What's good?
And the one friend that I have, and I had mentioned this to Jeff before Ronan popped on. I have a lot of friends who have eclectic tastes, and they're all little experts in their own little areas of things. And I'm like, when I think of someone who I need to ask, like, well, what's a good Toho monster movie or a Godzilla movie or monster movie, I go to Ronan, who is joining us for this.
I have in fact seen every single Godzilla movie at least
Wow.
once.
There you
Every
go.
last one of them.
Impressive.
There you go. There you go. And before we get into it, because we're going to talk about the original 1954 Japanese film, Ronan, you wanted to talk about Shin Godzilla, which is from 2016, I think, 2014, 2016, somewhere
It's
around there.
around there, yeah.
And then obviously we're going to talk about minus one, which just came out a couple weeks ago. So before we dive into the original, Ishiro Honda directed Japanese version, I just kind of want to gauge everybody's sort of like, I guess, fandom for Godzilla. I guess you would call these kaiju monster movies. Growing up, I was always a fan of Mothra more than Godzilla. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
had seen the original Godzilla, but actually the Raymond Burr Americanized version of it. I didn't see the actual Japanese version till way later in life. But I always thought Godzilla was a cool monster. I had toys. I mean, I still have. Here's my Godzilla magnet here, and I'm sure if Ronan had his camera on, he'd have Godzillas all over the place, toys and whatnot. But I was
I
never like a
own no camera.
huge
There is
fan
no
of these
camera
Toho.
to turn on.
Okay, well, I'll just put like your photo for this review. You're just
You should
Godzilla.
put like a little picture of Godzilla's head or
Yeah,
something.
that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I
No.
was never a huge fan of these. Mostly, I would catch them on TV every once in a while, and so I never really saw a full, complete movie until very later on in life. So always liked them. I always thought they were kind of enjoyable and fun, but it was never like a specific focus of mine growing up. Jeff, how about you? Were you a big fan of these kaiju movies growing up?
No, I think I'll just echo what you said. These were the sort of movies that would come on TV, sometimes even in the middle of the day and stuff. They were very accessible. All you had to do was turn on the TV and you'd probably come across one of these. And, monsters and all that stuff. It's cool. It's neat. So as a kid, you enjoy watching them. I'd watch it. And you'd pick out like you said, Mothra, you'd pick out your favorite monsters because you'd see like, oh, there's the three-headed guy. I like that one. Or here's the robot Godzilla. I like that one.
Yeah.
So I know I'm not using the correct terms there, but
Yeah, it's fine. And
It's close
one of the
enough.
interesting things that I always thought was interesting about Godzilla is the Godzilla movies that I watched growing up, because I didn't watch the original until later on. I'd seen the ones with
mhm.
Mothra and stuff, and the goofy one
Yeah,
was
it
like
wouldn't
a kid.
be like the one that you happen to cross in the afternoon on syndication or something. It would not be the 1954 one. It would be, some color one
Yeah,
down the road
and it
whiles.
it always seemed
Yeah.
like Godzilla was a good guy. Like the movies
Yeah.
that I saw, I
Yep.
was like, "Oh, Godzilla's a good guy. He's helping the humans do all this stuff." And I guess I never thought that was that cool. I was like, "Oh, Godzilla should be a big monster and evil and destroying things."
hmm
And later on, I would find out that's the case. Now, Ronan, you're a big fan of these movies. Clearly, you said you've seen every single one of them that's been released. When did you get into Godzilla and the kaiju stuff, and where did your love of this IP come from?
As far as the it's I'm too old and my memory's too shot for me to say, "I remember the first time I saw Godzilla." No, I have no fucking clue when
Yeah.
I first watched it, but as far back as my childhood can go, I remember having, like, Godzilla toys, and, if you were a Godzilla fan or if you like the idea of, like, giant monsters, giant robots, stuff like that, tracking down Godzilla movies in the early 90s, it got easier into the late 90s because they started to actually import over, like, in VHS stands. You could find the Heisei Godzilla movies, which are the ones from the 90s. But the one the Showa era stuff, like from the 50s to the 70s, that shit was really hard to find unless you got lucky on, TV and something came on. My Some of my earliest recollections of Godzilla was we would record on the TBS Superstation. Like they had
Yeah.
like the Super Scary Saturday where Mr. God, who was it? The Monster guy was like hosting the videos, and for whatever reason, because it
Like
was
Herman
Turner,
Munster?
yeah, because it was Turner in the early 90s, they were showing Godzilla versus King Kong, and we, of course, recorded that via VHS tape with the, with the express permission of, Turner Broadcasting Systems,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they did this bizarre promo where it was fucking Jim Cornette and Michael Hayes
Hell
as
yeah.
managers for Godzilla and King Kong.
That's
That's
awesome.
got to be on
Like,
YouTube,
cutting
right? Somewhere?
Must be.
I
It
hun
must be.
you can 100% find, like, Jim Cornette and Michael Hayes, like, doing promo shit for Godzilla and King Kong, but
That's
I
rad.
had I had that recorded, and outside of that, the big break, if you were a Godzilla fan that time frame, was, again, on Turner. TNT did a, Godzilla Monster Fest thing in, like, '94, where over a course of, like, a Saturday night, they showed, like, fuck, 6 movies, and, like, that was it. You might get lucky and you might catch one on Sci-Fi, whereas it would later become the Sci-Fi network. Like, you might get lucky, and, the outside of that, the Holy Grail, the thing that, I'm sure even Steve has seen at least 2 Godzilla movies because of this, is, of course, Mystery Science Theater 3000, showing, 2 Godzilla movies, and, of course, you have those recorded because you like Godzilla, and, like, your pickings were slim back in those days. It got
Mhm.
a little easier, and, Matt, you even mentioned, like, "Yeah, I didn't see, like, the Raymond like, I didn't see the original Japanese Gojira until much later in life." That was almost essentially by design. That like, it wasn't in the original uncut, unedited, Gojira was not did not come into America. I think the first time was sometime in, like, 2002 or so, like, 2009, something like that. That was the first time it was officially released. Outside of that, you had to do, like, pro wrestling shit and get tape traders to get you a copy from fucking Japan. So it was hard going back in the day.
So what made you really love these monster movies? Because I think kids in general, kids always love monsters, and they always like to see like
Yeah.
monsters destroying stuff. But you know, was there something specific, Ronan, about Godzilla and this sort of Toho monster verse? You know, just relating it to me, like I saw like the Universal monster movies from the 30s and 40s when I was a kid. They would show those on television and stuff, and I really gravitated because that was like the first cinematic universe, right? Everyone talks about Marvel and stuff, but these monster movies and franchises and IPs were doing that in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s with the Toho stuff. Was there something particular about Godzilla and all these monsters that you really latched onto?
Honestly, it was kinda just more or less, it was cool watching giant monsters fight because, like, I have seen, like I mentioned, I've seen every
That's
Godzilla movie
fair.
at least once, but, I will also go out on a limb and say the bulk of them, like, you're watching them you are watching them for that, like, cheesy enjoyment of watching, like, a guy in a heavy suit smash a cardboard building. Yeah, I say that it's even just like that. Even that's like oversimplifying it. There's genuine craft to the way that they would set up those sets, and you use the camera to make things look bigger. Buildings in the foreground are smaller than the ones in the background. There's genuine craft that the Japanese learned and how to do this stuff. They're still really good at it when they do it. But there is also that kind of the cheesiness to it. It's like it's sort of like if the people who would watch a stop motion movie today, you're doing it because you enjoy that art form, not because it's like the superior way to do like a dinosaur. It's just not. You're doing it because you like that art form. So it's
I think there's also, I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think also, even as a very young kid, when you encounter something, I was speaking for myself anyway, I encounter something that's Japanese or foreign at all, Japanese specifically in this case, the fact that it's foreign, it makes it exciting or interesting in a way, because it is pretty different from, I don't know, the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon that I was watching before the Godzilla movie came on or something. There, you can just sense that there's something different about it, and it's compelling for that reason. I also remember, what's the, Ronan, you might know this, the genre of show that, like, for example, the Power Rangers are an example of, because they had those masked team up shows going way before Power Rangers. But I remember on some TV show late at night, some syndicated rerun of one of those shows from Japan was on. And I found that immensely compelling because A, it's just fun cartoon action type stuff, but then B, the fact that it's foreign and it's from some other, culture's point of view of something that they put together. Even as a young kid, I found that compelling, and I probably didn't even understand that was interesting me in that way at that time. I just thought it was cool, but I think that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, I think it's either the name of the genre or it's just what Power Rangers is called in Japan. But I think it's a tokusatsu or something like that genre. But
Yeah,
it's like,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, it's either the name of the genre or that's what Power Rangers are called in Japan. It's one of the two. But like I
Yeah.
would also include, like, I've never watched. I watched American Power Rangers. I've never watched like the Japanese version of it,
Mm.
or like Kamen Rider, or
Yeah.
Ultraman. But and Godzilla appears in the '70s Ultraman. He's canon in that universe.
Hmm.
but so, but I've never seen any of those, but I believe that's the genre of it, and it's more or less the same thing. When the Godzilla movies
Yeah.
stopped making money, they just kind of switched their interest into making those really low budget TV shows.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, let's go ahead and get into the first of our reviews of this sort of Godzilla trilogy. We're going to talk about Gojira, 1954, directed by Ishiro Honda. This was I guess, the original sort of kaiju Japanese monster movie that this entire IP that's going on to this day was sort of born from. And I mean, Jeff, do you want to give it just a broad over? Now, we watched the Japanese version, right? Did anyone watch
I
the
watched
Raymond Burr
whatever
one?
is on Tubi, which it was in
Okay.
Japanese. It appeared to be
Yeah, about to say,
correct to me.
Yeah.
Was Raymond Burr in it? Because if Raymond Burr was in it, you watched the,
Yeah.
which I mean, it's close enough. Like I can get into the differences later on. Let you go through the
Yeah.
description of it.
Well, yeah, just so that the audience understands, there were two versions of this film that were released. One in '54, which was the original Japanese version called Gojira, and then 2 years later, because back then they would sell these movies into different territories, and when they gave it to the United States says, "Well, you know what? We're going to kind of re-edit a lot of this, and then we're going to film extra
None of it
scenes
makes
with."
us look bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw an interesting YouTuber who said that he was comparing both because it came out as Godzilla King of the Monsters. So the American version was called Godzilla King of the Monsters, and the version is called Gojira. And he said that actually, you know, America sort of filming new scenes. They dubbed the whole thing in English, so there's no subtitles in the American version. They added a bunch of different scenes of Raymond Burr, who plays a sort of news reporter who's going over to, one of his old friends is the scientist in the Japanese version, and then they kind of use body doubles and stuff and different shots to piece it all together. And
For
this
the
YouTuber,
time, it's a good for the time, it's actually
yeah,
pretty good, like,
it
of
doesn't look
how well
terrible.
they blend that.
Yeah, it doesn't look terrible, and but this YouTuber was mentioning that a lot of people give that movie shit because it's like, oh, the Americans
Mm.
had to do that, but that was the gateway for a ton of people to get into Godzilla and like this stuff. Like I said, that was the very first version I ever saw of the original movie. I didn't even know. I mean, I don't remember how old I was when I first saw the black and white original one, but I just remember having Raymond Burr in there, and that's what made in his narration and stuff like that, and it's more accessible to our culture because you're just a kid. Are you going to read subtitles all the time? Are you going to be interested in reading subtitles and all that? So, on one hand, it feels kind of shitty because you took some, and from what I've read, Ishiro Honda
Right.
did not even know that this happened. Like, he did not even
Oh.
know that these scenes were filmed. So, from the filmmaker perspective, that's super shitty. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
filmmaker. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that is shitty. But on the other hand, it's like, well, it did introduce tons of people into this world and
Uh-huh.
this universe, and those people did go back and eventually watch Ishiro Honda's version. So, in the grand scheme of things, was it more beneficial than negative? I don't know. That's a debate we can have. But Jeff, talk about the original Gojira, the Japanese version, the non-Raymond Burr one. Sort of, what is a grand sort of overview of that movie?
We have some guys out on the sea sailing out in the boat, and then something happens to them. These people are lost, and they send another boat to go get them, and then that one disappears. Eventually, the wizard sticks his head out of the water, and we got to deal with what the heck is this thing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Good,
And
short but pointless.
Hey, I'm not Steve.
Steve's mind is like a steel trap. He would go into minute detail about everything that happens, scene by scene. So yeah, I rewatched this today because I was interested after seeing -1 of
Mhm.
revisiting this one, and I gotta say, like, I still think this movie's great. Like, I still think it's a
Yeah.
fantastic movie, and the reason why I think it's a fantastic movie, and I'll get into it more when we talk about -1, is the core of these really great Godzilla movies is like the human element of them and what the humans are saying about our world, questioning like what are we doing, what why, like in Gojira, it's like, look, man, we're blowing up hydrogen bombs under the water.
Yeah.
It destroyed his habitat. Now he's come back to, we how are we going to stop this thing? It's we created the monster essentially, and it has a considering the time, this came out in 1954, about a decade after World War II ended. Of course, Japan had been hit with atomic bombs from the U.S. And when you know that kind of backstory and what the filmmakers were trying to say and how devastated that society was, just psychologically, as to what happened, and you see the imagery in this movie of Godzilla just completely destroying everything, and just thinking about like a Japanese viewer back in 1956 who was literally had lived through potentially atomic bombs and all that devastation, watching that on screen. I can't imagine kind of what they were. They probably were horrified. It was probably a
Mhm.
genuinely scary thing for them. And I really love what this film just sort of says ultimately about, like, I love I can't remember the name, like Senezawa or whatever, the scientist who
Ozawa.
creates he creates the oxygen destroyer or whatever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I cannot give this to anybody because all these politicians are going to take this and they're going to destroy the world with it. I cannot do it. And I love that whole interplay because it's true. That would happen today, if somebody
Oh yeah.
accidentally came across something like this, and the moral dilemma that he has to go through, and sort of how it all plays out in the end. Spoiler alert. If you're listening, go watch the original movie for here, but just sort of his self-sacrifice in order to keep this weapon out of people's hands and save all of Japan. All of that stuff is just, it's great. I just love all about it, or everything about it. And the other thing I really love about this is the monster sequences in it are really cool. Like, there's an extended maybe 10 to 15 minute Godzilla destroying Tokyo sequence in here, and there's some beautiful shots. Yeah, you can see that it's a guy in a rubber suit, and every once in a while, Godzilla's got some goofy looking eyes when he turns the camera.
Every
But
every once in a while, he turns into a hand puppet. Every once in a
yeah, it
while.
looks those look a little weird. But I don't mind it because I know there's meaning behind it, and I know what they're trying to say with it. And a lot of that really sort of dark, shadowy photography and watching Godzilla just burn Tokyo to the ground, and then seeing the devastation. There's a shot in this when Godzilla's rampaging through Tokyo that's really poignant, and I think it back in the day in the 50s, most monster movies were just stupid throwaway crap. They call them B movies for a reason. There was no message, but there's a moment where the director cuts to like a mother like holding her 3 daughters as she's watching Godzilla, and she's just like, "We're gonna go visit Daddy now. Like we're gonna go see Daddy." And the implication is Dad died probably in World War II, fighting for the
Yeah,
Japanese, or died in the atomic.
probably in the war. He might have died in the firebombing, which a lot of
Could
people
have.
forget that we firebombed Tokyo, but Godzilla minus one reminds you of that.
Yeah, and it's just a really great moment where it's like, in a B movie director's hands, a moment like that would never even be in it, but it just adds so much depth of this random
Mhm.
person, like cradling her children. She's going to die. Like Godzilla's about to kill her, and like, we're gonna go see Daddy now, trying to comfort her children in this horrible situation. So overall, like, I mean, I love Gojira. I loved it when I saw the original Japanese as an older person. I loved it when I revisited it. Fantastic. Jeff, your thoughts on Gojira?
I think, yeah, absolutely. What you described about that scene, for example, when you can put some of that stuff in the movie and pull it off, that really elevates the rubber suit stuff. It makes the rubber suit stuff credible in a way that just looking at the rubber suit isn't, because you see the suit flopping and like clearly it's a rubber suit. But when you pull off that other stuff, then we the audience are like, yeah, we're going to come along for the ride regardless of what the suit looks like. And I'm not saying the suit is horrible or anything. I wanted to ask you, Matt, tangential question. So this movie is 19. This is like 70 years old at this point.
Yeah.
So back in those days, because you mentioned the Universal Monsters movies from the 30s and stuff. So I sit here and watch the movie, and as we just described, we appreciate the rubber suit and think it looks cool and everything. Back in those days, if I was a person in 1950 or 1930 watching those other movies, was I actually shocked and scared and impressed by the special effects? Is that how that worked? And I just don't know any different, because I grew up in a world where I had things way beyond that from the get-go for me.
Sure,
You're sitting
especially
behind the set of The Thing. So like, that was, if you had shown The Thing to the people in the 50s, I think they might have killed themselves in fear.
Okay, yeah, I wonder about that stuff. I mean, they tell stories about like people seeing The Exorcist and they're like, "Wow, this is just too much for me."
And there are stories going back, the original, like, Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff. People like fainting in the audience because Dracula. I mean, it looks cheesy to us, but again, we're coming at it with the knowledge of how these things are made. Like, just take America out of it for a minute, but like I said, putting yourself back as a Japanese audience who's never seen anything like this before, and they go in like, "Oh, what is this?" And then they're seeing this giant monster. People have a ability, if they don't understand what they're watching or how it's being portrayed, they're much more, and I'm sure there are savvy people out there like, "Okay, yeah, it's just a guy in a rubber suit," but a lot of people, especially younger people, were really terrified by what they saw. Same thing when they saw the Wolfman in the 40s and stuff. People were freaking out when they saw that, and a lot of that goes back to how the filmmakers portray it, right? So if you look at that goofy, well, I don't know, Ronan, what's the one? Is it Son of Godzilla, where it's Godzilla's goofy kid and he's doing
Godzuki.
The Godzuki's from the TV show. No,
Manila, okay.
Manila is the name of the factory thing that that's the one you're talking about.
Nobody's looking at that as being terrified by it, even if they saw it, unless you're a really little kid and you just have no idea. But a lot of it's tone, setting the tone. You look back at the Wolfman, right? If you go watch that original Wolfman movie, it's so good. And I actually love James Rolfe when he does his Monster Madness and he talks about these old Universal movies. He actually provides a lot of interesting information about those, but just the atmosphere of it and the dread and the shadows and lighting. Movies they're supposed, suspension of disbelief is a thing. It's always been a thing. It's when we yell at filmmakers when they can't pull it off. So, and I think largely Gojira did, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that 70 years later we're still talking about this movie.
Yeah, and the one other thing, speaking of 70 years later, the one other thing that I noticed is I think they have his screech in this original movie. Right. So like as iconic as, I hate the word iconic. I just used it. But they came up with that, and that's a big stamp on his brand forever. What Godzilla sounds like when he roars, and they had that from the beginning.
Yeah, and when we talk about -1, they even use the score from this original movie in -1. It's
Yeah,
so good. But Ronan,
yeah.
what are your
Well,
thoughts on the
I
original
take it you
Gojira?
haven't seen Shin because they do the same thing in Shin. But yeah,
I have not
I
seen Shin,
take it back to
but
something. Yeah, take it back to something you mentioned while you were kind of describing the effects and stuff. It's how like, oh, people hadn't seen anything like this before. I throw an exceptional caveat to that. The Japanese had seen something like that before. They literally just lived through it. That's part of why it was so terrifying to them
Yeah.
is that they were having to
yeah.
sit through it again. So like
Mhm.
like a
Well,
little
we
bit
didn't
of an
stick a
exception.
giant
Like
lizard on them.
no, no, no. But like, if you look like the opening of the movie, like that first boat that gets hit, that's a direct reference to something that happened to the Japanese. Like this movie came out in '54, like 3 years before that, a fishing boat. I think it was like the Lucky Dragon 7 or something like that. Ventured to, like it was they were out fishing and America was doing what America do when we were testing nuclear
Yeah.
bombs, and one of them was
Dropped a
way bigger
hydrogen
than we
bomb.
thought.
Yep.
It was way bigger than we thought, and it irradiated these fishermen, and that was a pretty big international incident because at this point we're supposed to be in peace terms with them, and here we are nuking them again. Is how they felt.
Yeah,
So
and
like that was what.
to get to that historical thing, that's a great point because the original Gojira, they actually show stock footage of the Japanese military throwing the those depth charges and stuff. That's actual
Yeah,
footage from war and stuff like that. And like you said, that was a big thing that the Japanese were deeply concerned that Americans testing hydrogen bombs in the Pacific near them was going to irradiate and kill all the fish that they use to literally survive from day to day. And this film just puts it up there on the screen for all these people. I mean, just imagine an entire society traumatized. I mean, we always talk about what happened to Americans after 9/11 and how our society became traumatized. Imagine if two nukes were dropped on there and then your entire government is basically deemed, nope, sorry, you're done. Americans are going to stay here. We're going to run everything for you. Just what it does to the psyche of a society, to have their entire culture and society sort of co-opted by the country that defeated you. And then the filmmakers like, we're gonna discuss this in the form of a monster movie, and we're gonna
yeah.
show what
While
it's
we were occupying them, they weren't allowed to make movies like what they would consider propaganda or something. Like they weren't allowed to make movies that were referencing the events of the war, so they hid it in this monster movie. Because again, the boat, like the Lucky Dragon, that was a direct commentary on it. Like the irradiated fish, like you see that worry popping up in the
yeah.
like. And then, of course, when Godzilla starts coming onto land, like that whole attack on Tokyo, when they show you the aftermath of it, the irradiation. You mentioned the mother who was like telling her kids like, "Don't worry, we're going to see Daddy soon." They also like they check back on that family in the aftermath, and you see that no, the mom died. The little kids do not get to go back to Daddy, so now the kids are orphaned. Although if you also check, they're checking everybody in the hospital for radiation. Godzilla is so toxic in this movie that his simple presence probably is going to cause all of these people to die later on down the road if they weren't lucky and didn't burn in the inferno that he created.
Well, I like
That's
when I like when the scientists are in his footprint and all the people are up
Yeah.
there, and the scientists like, get back, this is really dangerous. And then one of the guys just picking up the trilobite or whatever, and they're like, stop
they
handling
tell
that,
him.
you're
It's
gonna
like
die.
he's
And
like,
it
"Oh
should,
yeah," and he just puts the trilobite into a box. And it's like it's all like we didn't really know all the aftermaths of radiation too. So it's like that kind of ignorance of what it does. We just know it's toxic. They didn't
yeah.
know like all the aspects of fallout at that point.
In the American
Like,
version, the Raymond Burr version cut a lot of that stuff out. Also, like for example,
Mm.
kind of like the scientist at the very end who mentions things like, if we keep doing this, another Godzilla is going to rise or whatever. All of that was cut out of the Raymond Burr version. So, like, even the Americans, when they released Godzilla King of the Monsters, sanitized a lot of the subtext that Honda was putting in this original one. So,
yeah,
I think they're both good movies. I think the Japanese one is superior. But I think if you're a young person and you're like, oh, Godzilla King of the Monsters is like your gateway into Godzilla, I think it's still a really, really good movie. But Ronan, your overall thoughts on Gojira? How do you feel about that?
It still holds up pretty well. Like yeah, like the suit is a little when you like the few moments that you really have to linger on it when it's like you in the daylight, for example. Yeah, it looks kind of silly in those scenes, but like any good filmmaker, even though this was a first, like they originally wanted to make it stop motion, but they realized that nobody in Japan knew how to do that, and making it that way probably would have taken them like 2 years or so. And so they were like, "No, no, we're not going to be able to. How about a guy in a suit?" And they were like they started that, and they nobody really knew all the ins and outs of doing modeling stuff, like model making is like they had to figure all of that out as they went along. They figured out how to do Godzilla's roar. It's a leather glove coated in resin going down a bass string, just and then they played that in reverse, and there's the sound. That's how they got it. Uh, it works. It's like they designed that suit to be seen in the dark, with fire silhouetting behind it, and that's
It looks
like it
cool
works.
too.
That yeah,
Yeah,
it
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 looks
looks
cool.
cool, and that's all. That's like for whatever reason we have this idea that Godzilla is green, and he's not.
Yeah.
He's charcoal. Like he's like charcoal gray.
Uh,
There's only one movie where he's green. But like he's always been this kind of charcoal gray black color because that's to signify that he was burned horribly by the bomb, and that's another signifier to tying him to it. There's even the possible. I've seen some interpretate because like early on, Godzilla comes onto Odo Island, which that island is referenced in all three of these movies, Shin Godzilla and minus one. Odo Island is kind of
mm.
his home territory. But if you pay attention to that, that island had a monster problem before the bomb got there. So like it's possible that maybe he is just a divine angry spirit. Yeah, it's like it could be because they were sacrificing virgins to him long before the war.
I like that
Hmm.
So
lore. I like the lore that
Yeah,
they
that
have in
is
there, like
cool.
that old guy, because no one, again, it's a generational thing, right? You have the young people, like, what are you talking about? And the old guy's like, listen to me. Gojira is a thing. Like, every single time all the fish would be gone or whatever, and Gojira would rise, whatever we sacrificed. It's very similar to King Kong from 1931, I think it is, where they put Fay Ray out there is the sacrificed King Kong to appease him.
yeah,
Very
they
similar
were
sort of thing.
definitely influenced by King Kong, like pretty much anybody else who saw it at the time. That's like
Yeah,
King
yeah,
Kong was a huge influence for this movie.
yeah. And I
So
think
I
we
just did a quick Tubi check, and yeah, they have both the Gojira, the 1954, and then also the 1956 King of the Monsters. So
okay.
yeah,
shout out once again to
Tubi's great.
I
Tubi
th-
for
I
having it all.
I
Not to
kind of
mention all
think
these other Godzillas.
I
So
think
yeah.
that I think that the Raymond Burr King of the Monsters nowadays gets so much shit thrown at it because I mean, one, we now know at the time, again, early 90s and stuff, yeah, it was only kind of whispered upon in hushed tones and in nerd monster magazines. So like, hey, well, this is actually different from the Japanese version, right? Then we finally got it, and now, yeah, now it's just like, oh well, like this is what they were hiding from, and like even to like Raymond Burr's credit, people like that, like yeah, he knew what the original movie was about because they got to screen it before. Like he was like, well, let me see the original one, so he knew the message of it, and he took it very seriously, which is why they offered him to pop up in other Godzilla movies. He turned them all down because he was like, no, these aren't what I was in until they brought in the script for Godzilla '84, and he was like, okay, I'll show up in this one. This one
Yeah.
is bringing it back because he took that role seriously. He respected what Godzilla meant.
Well, I think that it just goes back to how unique Gojira and King of the Monsters are, because King of the Monsters works on its own, even though it was altered by an American studio and put in a bunch of stuff. I think getting to the point where Raymond Burr, I'm sure, I mean, he was a pretty big star at the time. I'm sure he had influence and say over how the scenes were going to go and working that. So it's an interesting study and as an example of a film where normally we would be like, how dare you alter the original filmmaker's work and vision? Not even Mission
Mhm.
Impact, we didn't even tell them that they were going to do this. But then that altered version actually turns out, I wouldn't say it's as good, but it's still very effective. The people involved still take it very seriously, and it helped bridge cultures to get an entire new culture of people into this stuff. So I think both films have their merits, and It's one of those things that someone would be like, well, yeah, we can't alter other people's films because X, Y, and Z. Look what happened. Gojira and King of the Monsters. I wouldn't necessarily be able to, argue against that. As someone who has always considered himself true, like, no, the filmmaker's vision is the filmmaker's vision. Don't fuck with it. And if Jeff were to be like, well, how about Gojira and King of the Monsters? I'd be like, damn it. Okay, maybe that's the exception.
I'll remember that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Works
That'll
well
be
enough.
good.
It works well enough because it doesn't fuck with the theme. It does it mainly what they did. And I mentioned it kind of snarkily, but it is true. What they were doing was they were whitewashing, a lot of the nuclear, like a lot of the horrors of what the bomb was, because we were still kind of keeping a lot of that shit under wraps in the country at the time. So again, I'd be snarky when I say that, like, well, it makes us look kind of bad, but that is the genuine truth as to why they were cutting that shit out, is because it made us
Oh,
look
yeah.
kind of bad.
Yeah, no, I
But
agree. I
the
agree.
theme,
But either way, I think both
the
of them are.
anti-nuclear theme still, it still sticks in, and that's why it still, for the most part, works.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get into Shin Godzilla. I didn't watch it, so I will let you two handle it. Jeff, what is Shin Godzilla? Tell me, what is this all about?
Well, Shin Godzilla is, and the filmmakers elude me. Was this the guy who did Evangelion, Ronan? Is there some tie to that?
Yeah, that's
I
why
think there might be, but
that's why a lot of the Evangelion music is in Shin Godzilla.
So it's a kind of a reboot or a restart. Like, it starts from scratch. It doesn't build on pre-existing Godzilla lore. This was in 2016, and it was well received at the time, and I think it's still pretty well liked. Now, it is a little bit weird. It's fair to say it's weird, right, Ronan? So it's Godzilla comes out of the ocean and starts whacking around on the city, but he's not fully formed yet. He just comes out. The whole point, or one of the things that happens in the movie, is he evolves. He has different phases or stages of evolution. So he comes out and he's just kind of a floppy mess. He looks weird, but not super scary yet. He destroys some stuff, and then he shifts into the next phase, and then eventually becoming bigger and bigger and looking more like we are accustomed to him looking. But then intermixed with all of this, there is, and this is, I don't know if, like, because I watched the movie, and then afterwards I was like Googling interpretations, or like, what does this mean? What's going on here? Because I perceived that it was probably pretty good, but at the same time I didn't quite get it. So I don't know if, like, maybe if I was a Japanese person and I think it might be satirizing some of their political system, or the way their politicians behave in certain cases, or something like that. I think there's a bunch of satire and social commentary and stuff going on in this movie that I don't exactly pick up on. It's very, very talky in between the scenes of the Godzilla action, which are great, by the way. I think you could say the CG is a little suspect at times, but by and large, it's the scale that they show Godzilla. They do all these shots where it's pulled way back, and you see, like, Godzilla, and he's just like, the shot is pulled way back, so you see, like, an entire huge metropolis, and Godzilla's walking around in there blowing stuff up. And so it's the way that it portrays the scale of Godzilla is pretty interesting. They don't just do like a low angle shot shooting up at the monster to make you think, oh, this thing's really big. They just show you like a monster inside of a city blowing things up with all its laser beams and stuff. So that stuff is really cool. But in between that, it's very, very talky. It's all these bureaucrats in boardrooms and talking to fellow bureaucrats about what we're going to do. And I think they're trying to satirize the ineffectual nature of these bureaucracies dealing with something as urgent as Godzilla stomping on their buildings, like while they're having the meeting and stuff. So I don't know. So that's my take on it, Roden. I think there's stuff that I just don't get from out of the human scenes. All of these movies are broken up into scenes of the humans doing stuff, and then the scenes of the monster action. And the scenes in Shin Godzilla of the humans doing stuff, I don't quite understand. I don't feel like I was following like what they were really about. Did you understand any of that?
I'll give myself a little bit of credit. When I was first watching it, I did kind of figure out, it's like, oh, okay, this is, I kind of figure out what they're satirized, because the original Godzilla movie it's like it's not necessarily satirizing, but it's commentary on nuclear war. Like, how
Mhm.
nuclear weapons are bad. They shouldn't be used under any circumstances. Take it from us. We're the only nation on Earth that's had them used on us in anger. Don't let it happen to you. Uh, Shin Godzilla, while it still has the nuclear message, because instead of Godzilla being some kind of irradiated dinosaur, his origin is, well, he's just some kind of like he was just some sort of like a sea life amoeba thing, and they started dumping nuclear waste, and it
Mhm.
mutated him, and over the course of like
Yeah.
decades, it slowly but surely started to
Fukushima.
evolve and turn into this horribly grotesque thing. Uh, like that just kind of stumbles out of the ocean. What it's really commentating on, because it does, like they talk about how it's like, oh well, we have to, well, in order to do this, we need to, like, let's all get ready to move to the conference room to have a discussion about what we're going to say in the meeting room, because that's how their bureaucracy
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
And like so like we don't, because a lot of that's also written in Japanese and stuff, so you don't necessarily catch it. But what they are commentating on is just how fucking inefficient the government was to deal with the tsunami, and then the
Yeah.
following Fukushima, like a nuclear power plant issue, because
Okay.
that, like,
Okay.
that's the commentary for it. Like, and it, like, unlike a snarky movie where it's like, oh well, this is how bad the bad things are, it actually does end optimistically, because it's he, like, a Deciano, I believe is the director's name. He decides to go with, well, the guys who are going to get us out of this situation are going to be the political outcast and weirdos and the scientific fringe people, which in reality is not how that would work. Those are the last people you wanted
Mhm.
to have to having power. We just went through 4 years of that, so like that, like those are the last guys that you would want to have running the show. But but they actually succeed, and they keep Japan from being, because this movie also answers the question of, it's all been forgotten that when we defeated Japan in World War II, they're not allowed to have a standing army that's over like 10,000. So that's their self defense force. If something is
Mhm.
fucking with them, we are obligated to step up and say, "I got this," and push the Japanese aside, and then bomb the shit out of whatever's happening. And this movie actually addresses, like, well, yeah, why isn't America blowing the shit out of this lizard? And then we do, and
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
was it results horribly, but that's towards the midpoint. But so you get Godzilla showing up in the ocean, you never see its first form, you just see the tail. And then they're talking about how it's like, well,
Right.
it's too heavy, the square cube law, it can't, something that size can't come onto land. And then literally, as he's giving a press conference talking about how, no, you don't have to worry about it coming on shore, somebody comes up and tells him, whispers into his ear like, it's on land, turns, and then cut to footage of it on land slopping through the streets, and it looks really goofy and silly, but at the same time, the
Yeah.
eyes, like, it's almost unsettling, because it looks like something that was
Yeah. Yeah.
stillborn, still like some kind of
Looks like some
stillborn.
Pokemon from hell or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it shouldn't be alive, because it's literally bleeding everywhere. There are deleted scenes where its blood is like corrosive, so it bleeds, and then cars instantly
Mhm.
starts to rust and shrivel because of what its blood is doing. And like, it's just it doesn't look alive. There's nothing going on in its brain. Like, you could, like, you watch Godzilla -1 and you see the eyes, and this is a pissed off, angry thing. Shin Godzilla, it's like, I don't even know if it comprehends that it is a thing. It just, because it doesn't seem to acknowledge life, its own
Yeah,
or
and there's
anything.
that aspect of like the human, like what you say, like he comes out and he's not sort of intelligent. He's destroying things by virtue of his massive size, and he's just flailing around. He can't really help himself. But then the humans start to interact with him, and that sort of his further evolutions are based on the way the humans not I mean, they have to deal with the situation, obviously, so it makes sense that they would attack him. But the way he changes is a response to being attacked by humans.
It's a response also to being on land for so long, because
Hmm.
it starts off as this floppy thing. It doesn't have arms. It just has little, like, chicken nubs. It can barely walk. And then after being on shore for like 20, 30 minutes, just walking in a straight line, going over buildings, it suddenly stops. The whole body starts to wiggle. And I remember watching it for the first time, and then I suddenly heard like that music, that musical cue that it plays when it starts to like mutate and wiggle. It was like I remember that because it's just so it's from Gojira. That like it's this is another one of those movies that's pulling sound cues from like Gojira. It's also pulling sound effects. Anytime you hear him walking and that kind of big thud where its body hits the ground, that pow 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 kind of noise, those are Showa era sound effects. It's all pulling stuff. Uh, if you're going to use member berries in your shows or TV movies and stuff,
Yeah, that's cool.
use the member berries like this. Don't use them to patronize me. But and then it starts to evolve and it gives out the roar from the first movie, but it's also because it has a nuclear reactor inside of it. It can't be on land. It hasn't evolved a way to cool itself down, and then suddenly it bolts back for the water. The Jeff mentioned that like this is a movie full of talking, because I don't think that there's this kind of like the first Gojira. I would say that the main character in the first Gojira might be Sarazawa, but I don't know. He's not introduced into the movie for 40 minutes. I
Right.
checked, but and for this movie, it's like who's the main character? The main character is just the Japanese government. It's as
Yeah,
weird as it
yeah,
sounds. It's the
yeah.
Japanese people learning how to deal with a situation like this, and hoping, trying their best. And yeah, we actually don't look terrible in this movie either. Actually, which is it's a stunning thing because we do actually help. Although really, in the long run, it's the French who get the one up because the French are the one who analyzed Godzilla's DNA and like, yeah, if you use this chemical of proteins, you'll actually shut him down to a scram reactor of
Mhm.
such and such thingy. But like,
Yeah.
So,
And
what do you guys think of this movie? Is this something you'd recommend that I watch as just a
I
casual?
think you might I think you might like it. It's very different from the other ones. The CG is, I mean, CG is getting better all the time, I suppose. But this is, it looks rough around the edges. It looks cartoony at times. But I think it's interesting and it's doing something pretty different. And there's also, like maybe you would pick up on some of the stuff that I was not quite sure of. And there's also like at the end, the very, very end, there's kind of I won't spoil it, I guess, but there's kind of like a shock horror thing. It's just like an image. It's just a
there's
thing that they show
there's
at the
weird
end.
yeah, there's weird body horror stuff going on with this too. Just
Yeah, at the end, like you can Google on the internet, and I'm like, what the heck did this mean? And there's tons and tons of fan theories about like, well, what is this? What is that? And so that's kind of cool too. They kind of it's not a major part of the movie, but it's in the movie, and it's something that people find interesting. I certainly did. So
They don't
yeah,
have done like
and
a sequel to this or anything. This is just like its
I
own
no, and
one-off.
I think they
I
said Ronan. I'm not sure, but I think they said they're never going to make a sequel to this.
yeah, apparently because I don't think that the like again if I'm getting the director's name right, Hideki Kamiya,
Hmm.
like the guy who did Neon Genesis Evangelion. Apparently he and Toho, although like this movie made like Godzilla minus one is like getting all this praise for making tons of money. Shin Godzilla made a fuck ton of money too. Like they like
Hmm.
in front of Toho's office, they had like, a Heisei Godzilla statue in front of the building. And they took that down and put Shin Godzilla in front of it because of how like this movie like won like, like awards in Japan and stuff. So like like this was a pretty big deal and a pretty big merchandise mover for them. It didn't hurt that he had three forms, which is three toys. But but like
I don't want that toy of the first form.
no, but apparently, he and the studio didn't get along very well. If Matt ever sees Shin
Yeah.
Godzilla, I can because like apparently, if the movie had lasted the movie went on another 10 minutes, like the wild fucking shit that Godzilla was about
Okay.
to do is it's like reading this it's like hearing the story about what Alien 3 was supposed to be, this wood planet. It's kind of like reading that, like, this is some wild shit, man. Like what
Okay.
Godzilla was about to
I'll
do.
have to Google that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's some wild fucking shit as to what was about to happen before they got lucky and averted the apocalypse. But apparently there's not gonna be a sequel because he and the studio didn't get along very well. Although I
Hmm.
think they also let him do the Common Rider reboot, I think might have been during that where the relationship fell apart. But I don't want there to
Okay.
be a sequel to this. Like some
No, I don't. Yeah.
some things you can't like. You can do a sequel to minus one. I don't think you could do a sequel to Shin Godzilla, not without getting crazy. So
Yeah.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
one of my criticisms my lone criticism of -1. But that's a good segue. Let's get into Godzilla -1. This is obviously
Yeah.
the new film that just released, and I want to say fuck you, Greg Marcus and Marcus Theaters, for putting this on the smallest freaking screen.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. We have all these giant, massive, multiplexes here in our town, and they stuck it on the little tiniest big screen in there, which is it's a crime against art as far as I'm concerned. Oh my gosh. So yeah, Godzilla minus one. I was pretty excited to go see this because I heard a lot of people like praising it and whatnot. I was like, cool. I didn't even really notice that this was coming out until fairly recently. I think I saw a trailer
Yeah.
for it before a movie that I saw earlier this summer. I was like, oh, a new Godzilla movie's coming out. So Jeff, what is this generally about?
Go back and start the whole thing over again. Once again, this is post World War II. The Japanese are rebuilding. They do a great job of depicting these people living just among sticks and shacks and rubble, basically. They're trying to put their lives back together, rudimentary governments around and all this stuff. And they got to in order to get by, you're willing to do dangerous things. Like, for example, one of our main characters is willing to go out into the sea and clean up oceanic mines that were laid during the war. So you got to do all this stuff just to get by. Yeah, and everyone people are leaning on each other outside of blood relation. My neighbor across the street was killed and left an orphan behind. So I feel just it's my fellow man here, my countryman. I need to step in. And so we have this cobbled together family of circumstance. And it was all these people just trying to get by. But then this guy goes out into the water to do this dangerous work because that's what he needs to do. And then Godzilla appears. And then we have the story of Godzilla once again just coming onto land, destroying things, being a menace to everyone around. How are we going to deal with this? They're limited. They don't have an army like they would in other circumstances because they've just been destroyed. But so it's just the people finding the resourcefulness to come and to find a solution to Godzilla, but also the human element in this one is great. And I'm not a person who likes thick dramas very much. I just won't go to see a movie that's a dramatic character study thing. It's not my thing. I want to see more Godzilla, less human drama. But the human characters in this are all very compelling, in my opinion, very relatable. You're rooting for these people. You want them to find a way out, to find a way to make things better for themselves, to get out of these tough situations, to forgive themselves, to forgive each other. So all the human stuff in this movie is really stands out and is really great.
Yeah, I will echo that, and I'll go ahead and say it. This movie made me cry. I could not believe I was watching a Godzilla movie and it made me cry. A lot of people, look at me like, "Oh God, a movie made you cry." I actually think that's a huge positive to any piece of art. If something can elicit an emotional response like that out of you,
Yeah.
I think that's great, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. But I was so sort of happy with this movie because again, the dude who he was a kamikaze pilot and he chickened out, right, and then him dealing with the guilt of him feeling like he let his country down and he was the cause of them losing and stuff, and even his fellow countrymen, there was that woman who was basically just shouts him down early on. He was like,
Yeah.
how could you have done this? Look what you caused, right? You have all that kind of stuff, and Godzilla looks awesome. He's exactly what I want Godzilla to be: pissed off, angry, destroying everything, right? And just like I said, all the characters in this, I was just like, there's a moment in here when one of the characters, kind of a pivotal moment for our main character. I'd say the kamikaze pilot's kind of like the main character of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
There's a
one has
pivotal
more
moment.
traditional structure where you have a main character in this movie, unlike the other two.
Yeah, there's a pivotal moment with another character that happens, at the end of the first act, I guess, and at the end when it's revealed, like you suspect something has happened to this character, and when it's revealed, oh, I felt it was completely earned and deserved. Not just like one of those cheap things like, haha, well, this person was actually alive the entire time. I felt so good, so happy when he ejects, and all this and all these interactions he has. I was just like, I was like floored by this. I was like tears of happiness and joy because
Yeah, yeah.
I was so happy with everything in this movie except one thing. So, I love the fact that they kind of addressed Godzilla's kind of got like Wolverine's healing factor, like because you see Godzilla getting hit by missiles and stuff, and he just regenerates
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I felt, and you guys may disagree with me on this. This is just how I felt coming out of it. I felt the end was so powerful as sort of like the human spirit overcoming all of
Mhm.
this that I was like, please don't give us essentially a
Don't
stinger of
show.
Godzilla gonna come back, and they do. At the very end of this, they
Yeah.
get okay, he's down, but no, he's regenerating again. And to me, and maybe it's a minor gripe. It doesn't like harm how I think about the film because I think it's a brilliant movie. I think this should be nominated for best foreign film at the Oscars, at the very least, if not
Mm.
best picture. Um, I just felt like you've taken me this whole way. I wanted to see this does not need a sequel. This, in my opinion,
Yeah.
should have been a one-off. These people have come together. The story is so perfect. They destroy Godzilla. It's done. It's over. They have went, and then it's just like, no, no, he's regenerating. It's going to happen all over again. And I didn't like that aspect of it. Just the last five
Yeah,
seconds.
I can agree with that. I'll sign on to
I
that.
didn't dig that. Otherwise, I thought this film was fantastic. I will buy this when it comes out on Blu-ray or whatever. I will watch this again.
You watch it at home and it'll be on a bigger screen than we had at the theater.
That's true. And I want to show this to my fiance because she was not. She was
Oh, she didn't go.
no. She was. I mean, Godzilla stuff is not really her thing. Not something I think she
Sure.
really was super interested in. And I didn't know what this film was going to be like because I think she asked like, "Well, what's this going to be about?" Monster running around destroying stuff.
I think it's very crowd pleasing. I think
Oh
very
yeah,
accessible. I think,
super
yeah.
good, and I want to show her so that she can sort of experience this as well because it is such a good movie. And
Mhm.
just as a plug, we're gonna have the Outpost Unknown's top films and stuff of 2023, and check out that video coming up because I'm sure this movie is going to be way up the list. But Ronan, as a
Mhm.
Godzilla aficionado, sort of a hardcore fan here, tell us, what did you think of -1?
It takes a lot. Like, I like the movie; it's really good. When I say it takes stuff from other movies and just kind of lifts it, I don't say that in like it's stealing it from this. But two key aspects of this movie are taken from other Godzilla movies. So like Jeff kind of overskips it when he's talking like because our main character he has a direct connection to Godzilla. Like you mentioned
Mhm.
that he is a fighter, like he's a kamikaze pilot, and he chickens out at the last minute. Oh, my plane's malfunctioning, and he lands at Odo Island, which that ought to be the tip off of like, oh, bad shit's about to happen because as we just said, Odo Island is listed in the other two movies. Like the beginning of Shin Godzilla, they find this abandoned boat, and it's from a scientist who knew Godzilla was coming, and he left this packet of like genetic information. And then they find out, oh well, he comes apparently he comes from a place called Odo Island, so that gets connected in every one of these movies. But so but so he lands on Odo Island and he sees he's walking up to the shoreline and he sees all these dead fish and he's like, "Oh, that's weird. What's going on with the dead fish?" And one of the mechanics on the island's like, "Oh, there's a local legend that if the deep water fish die, then there's a sea monster called Godzilla who's coming ashore." That very fucking night, a giant dinosaur uh, so they give Godzilla an actual origin of him just being like a holdover dinosaur because he's in that more modern day
Mhm.
theropod T-Rex kind. He's not in the classic where the tail is dragging stance. He's in like a T-Rex stance where it's like, okay, this is a modern dinosaur. It's not gigantic. Guns probably could have killed it, which is where our main character gets a lot of his emotional torment for a good chunk of this movie, is that he watches all these mechanics who he's kind of become friends with. They just get slaughtered by Godzilla, and they're like, "You're the pilot, right?
He won't
Get
shoot.
into the get
Yeah,
into the
he won't
cock, get
shoot.
into the cockpit of the
Shoot.
plane and use
Yeah.
the 50
Yeah.
caliber on it." I was like, "We don't know it'll work. A 50 caliber will kill anything." In hindsight, it wouldn't have worked, but because like the Godzillasaurus, which I'm just going to call him that because from one of the show, like from one of the Heisei era movies, there was a character who was in World War II and was on an island called Odo Island, and he was saved from American troops by this monster that looked very similar to Godzilla that they call Godzillasaurus, who gets badly wounded by the American troops, and apparently just kind of lays there dying for about another 5 to 10 years before a nuclear bomb turns it into Godzilla. But so like that's an aspect taken from another Godzilla movie, which again I'm not shitting on it for. It's like, oh, well, that's cool. It's nice to see Godzilla.
Well, that sounds like for someone like you who's a super fan who gets that reference, isn't that I wouldn't take it negatively. Don't you think that's kind of neat that they incorporated this lore from some old, older movie and be like, yeah, we respect these older things. We want to include them.
When it's done properly, like they could have not shown him. Like, they could, like the original Godzilla movie, like when Godzilla comes ashore in the tsunami that the first time, you never see him. You just hear him and you see buildings falling in his wake. He's hidden by the storm. They could have done something like that, and that would have been fine too. So it's like, again, if you're going to do your nostalgia or your member berries or something, your callback from it, there are ways to do it right, and there are ways to do it that are just patronizing because it's like, that didn't need to be there. Bye. Like, this needed to be here because this ties the character directly to Godzilla. And like Godzilla, like he kills all but one of the mechanics.
Yeah.
And that's very important later on because again, this all ties together.
I love their relationship.
That's cool.
You could not have cut this out. And if you would cut this stuff out, the rest of the movie doesn't work. This is pivotal. Like you need our main character's relationship to Godzilla and his emotional torment is formed from this, and like his redemption with the mechanic later on at the end of the movie is based on this. So like again, if you're gonna this is how you could do a nostalgia thing and make it work because it ties directly into the story. And as far as like Godzilla in all of these movies has had a regenerative factor. It's never been shown visually like this, where you literally see skin reforming. But but that's always been part of the lore is that Godzilla had like the nuclear bomb gave Godzilla extremely advanced healing. So like the bombs, it's not that missiles don't hurt him; it's that missiles hurt him, and within seconds the damage is gone. That's part of how his rampages can go on. Yeah,
like he goes into berserker rage at a certain point. Missile hits him.
Yeah. But so as we said, like our main character goes back to Japan. He's in Tokyo, which was not nuked, but it is like destroyed. And that's, again, I mentioned this when we're talking about Godzilla. It's one of those often forgotten things that before the bomb, we were prepping for a land invasion, so we were firebombing the shit out of Tokyo, and that's why all of their homes are gone because they were firebombed. In this movie, that's one of those things that's often forgotten about. But so he comes home and you see the rebuilding process. So do any of you guys know why this movie is called -1?
Because it's supposed to be before. Yeah, it's supposed to be before SHIN or something, right?
I heard that it was the nuke event was Japan at 0, was the whole society was devastated, and then it goes to -1 because then they have to deal with another problem or something like that. Like Godzilla.
I thought it had to do with something.
It sounds stupid at first until you hear the logic, and you're like, okay, I guess that works. It's still a weird title, but that's the thing. It's like after the bomb, Japan society was literally at pretty much absolute 0, and they start to build themselves back up again, and then Godzilla comes around. It's like, what's worse than 0? There's nothing except for you're in the negative zone at that. You're at -1 at that point. But our main character, he gets a dangerous job but destroying undetonated mines from the Americans and the Japanese, and you have to do this in a rickety wooden boat because these bombs are magnetic. You can't do it in a nice big safe boat. You have to use a rickety wooden fishing boat. And he does this for a couple of years. And he builds his life back up. He's got this relationship going on with this woman who picked this type of stuff happened where she just found this crying baby because their family was probably killed in the firebombing, and so she's taking care of the baby, and he bumps into her, and now they're taking care of each other. Not in that kind of way, but they all take care of each other because that's what you had to do in this kind of circumstance. Everyone had to come together, and a couple of years pass, and then we see footage.
He's so scared to say he loves her and wants to marry her and stuff.
Yeah,
people are like, why didn't you get with her?
Yeah, like he's got the emotional trauma still attached to him. He still doesn't think he deserves it. Yeah, because again, it all ties back because that's why this movie works so well is that they did the human stuff right. You know, you can oftentimes talk about how it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want a Godzilla movie with no people in it. It's like you need that. That's crucial. Like if you don't want a Godzilla movie with people or where the people stuff doesn't matter, that's almost every other Godzilla movie. And like I've seen pretty much all of them, and there's only about 4 of them that are legitimately good. All the rest of them are just like you're watching it to yell at the screen. That's what all like you get enjoyment from watching monster fighting.
You want to see the monsters, and that's about it. Okay.
And you yell at the stupid shit on the screen. But and even then, it's not like good enough to be a best of the worst kind of bad. So you're really watching it for that. But like Bikini Atoll gets nuked, and then it cuts to you see Godzilla like getting hit by the bomb, and his skin instantly getting charred, and that's where his hatred comes from. But like so, this element they kind of pull from another Godzilla movie called. It has a stupid title, so we're just going to call it a Giant Monster All Out Attack. The actual name of the movie is Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. That is the name of the fucking movie.
That's awesome. That's a good movie.
Love Mothra.
Give
me a serious Mothra.
That's one of the few movies that I would say. There are plenty of those. Mothra was actually more popular than Godzilla for a bit there because.
And you need to point these
out. My wife loves Mothra. She's the
love Mothra.
Well, they made the first Godzilla movie, and then within 6 months they shoved out another Godzilla movie. They literally made it in about 6 or 8 months and put another one out. And in that movie, Godzilla gets frozen in like they don't have an oxygen destroyer, so they trap him in an iceberg, and then he is frozen for another 10-ish years or so, and then they make Mothra, they make Rodan. The Godzilla is not seen again until Godzilla versus Kong, and then he comes out of the iceberg. But the aspect where Godzilla has like legitimate angry hatred for humanity, that's taken from and also the ending resurrection scene is taken from the Godzilla All at Monsters Attack, because in that movie Godzilla is a legitimately angry spirit. He is the incarnation of the souls. That's one of the only times Japan has actually acknowledged that of what they did, because they really don't like to acknowledge the shit that they did to the Indonesians, to the Chinese, to the Philippines. Like they were. We
all got skeletons in our closet.
Yeah. Do not Google pictures of what they did for your mental health. It's pretty rough. But Godzilla is the physical embodiment of the rage of the people who the Japanese hurt in World War II. And that's why he's attacking Japan. He's a literal vengeful spirit. So at the end of the movie, I
want to watch it. Which one was that? I want to watch that one.
The one with the long title. So
really? Okay.
It's one of the ones. It's one of the only ones I would say this one's all right because it has.
Is it on Tubi? That's the thing. Check to see if it's on Tubi.
Okay, I'm gonna do a Tubi check right now.
It is, but while you do that, because I will spoil. They blow him up. They literally.
Yeah. What were you talking about actually, though?
Yeah. They blow him up at the end of that movie, and we see all of our characters being happy, and as the credits are starting to roll, we cut to the bottom of the sea, and there's this fucking giant heart sitting on the bottom of the water with no body attached to it that starts to beat.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You hear the Godzilla music start to play, and that's where that's the callback to just chunks of Godzilla.
Well, that stuff's good in my opinion. That's like a reference for the super fans, a deep cut for your.
The thing that confused me was what the fuck was that black shit crawling up her neck at the end of it.
I don't know if I remember that.
Black shit crawling up her neck.
The girl who the girl who he was too scared to say that I love you to, and he thinks she dies.
Okay.
Godzilla comes ashore, and we're talking about -1, comes ashore, and in his.
I wondered if maybe somehow she got the way she survived. I've spoiler alert, I guess, but the way she survived was maybe that she got a touch of his little power or something, but they don't heavy hand any of that because the movie doesn't need to put that type of stuff in it.
I completely missed that.
They go in for the big emotional hug, and the camera's kind of pan, and you hear a bit of a music sting as you see this black kind of like line stuff starting to creep up her neck. And it's like, what?
I must have missed that through my watery eyes. I don't remember seeing that at all.
It's there for a split second, but the music also, because the music takes a bit of a more ominous turn, because that's when we cut back to the ocean to see that, oh, well, we're not done yet. But like, this
Mhm.
movie
Okay. Well,
works
overall,
very
Ronan,
well.
what did you think of this movie? Like overall,
This
your
movie
impressions.
this movie's really good. Again, it works because this one actually tells a good human story, and Godzilla just so happens to be in the background, which is the best way to use your Godzilla, is to like tell a good human story, which is, that's why I
Okay.
like the
I guess
legendary movie,
I'm
the
confused
2014 one.
because you're saying it's good, but you seem to be coming across, at least to me, a little bit that you
You're not effusive enough for me.
like what exactly did you not like about it?
Yeah.
No,
Like comparing it
I
to your
liked
other
everything.
Godzilla movies.
No, I
Okay.
liked it. I do genuinely like this movie. I was like, I'm like, you asked for, like, our top 10 list, and that's on my top 10 list. So like, it's like,
Okay.
things that we've seen this year. So like, no,
So
no,
if you
it's
had to give
good.
a
I was
letter
just
grade
bored.
to this, if you had to give a letter
It
grade to
gets
this, Ronan, what would you give it?
it gets a solid A, a solid strong A. It's like it's a
Okay, cool. I'm gonna give it an A plus because I think it was awesome. I'm not even gonna knock it for that last 5 seconds. I'm just gonna pretend that didn't exist. I'm gonna delete that last 5 seconds from my memory and not even consider it going forward because I don't need to. Jeff, your letter grade of Godzilla -1.
I'd give it an A plus as well. I had the thought while I was watching the movie. If you recall when Top Gun Maverick came out, I was really snotty about that movie. I was really,
Yeah.
just really petulant about it.
Right.
I've since got over myself and changed my tune. And like, yeah, it's a great movie. So Godzilla -0 is a good movie, like a fun, pleasing, satisfying, entertaining movie in the same way that Top Gun Maverick was. If Godzilla is sort of out of your wheelhouse, but you can relate to how good if you saw Top Gun Maverick, because that's much more mainstream American. And if you saw that and thought, "Wow, that movie was great," I'm telling you, Godzilla -0 is good in the way that Top Gun Maverick was good. I
I
also
can't
think
wait to
that
see
this
Godzilla
movie,
-0.
We keep
yeah,
saying
you know what I mean. We keep saying -1 and -0, minus whatever. The other thing about this movie is I actually think it's super manly. This is a manly movie. It's all these men having to deal with their emotions, deal with things, deal with problems, and work together. Sometimes they're at odds, sometimes they're not. It's a very manly movie. Now, not to say that it's not very accessible and crowd pleasing for everyone. My wife saw it with me and she loved it too. I think anyone would like this movie. It's good, clean fun, but it's actually a very manly movie, in my opinion,
I
which
think
is refreshing.
I think it. I think that's good because again, I got emotional watching this movie, and I think it's a
Mhm.
reflection of the characters themselves are also very emotional. Even like men dealing with other men, and we have this
Mhm.
stigma in society, like men can't cry, men can't show their emotions, and blah blah.
Yeah.
Must be strong. But this is a whole film about men not being able to deal with their emotions, but then communicating their emotions to one another and then
Mhm.
overcoming what they were dealing with and the trauma that they were dealing with. And I thought the message just overall of everything was just so perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great movie. Ronan, do you have any final thoughts? Anything else that you wanted to drop about Godzilla -0 before we wrap this up?
Well, when I see -0, I'll let you know.
Damn it, -1. That's it, everybody.
No,
That is Outpost Unknown's review of Godzilla -1. We all loved it. It's fantastic, and go out and see it as quick as you can before it's gone from the theaters forever. So, with that, catch you later.